All right. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Feel free to say hello in the chat, share your name and where you're from. We just want everyone to, connect with us. Um, my name is Chinwendam. I am the project facilitator here with Ifarada Center for Excellence. I'm honored today to start the Kujenga Family Wellness Project Parenting Series webinar. So this is our first webinar for the fall this season, and we thank you for joining us. Before we begin, though, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement and an African ancestry acknowledgement. So before we begin, um, yeah. Oh, hold on. So sorry about that. We are honored to speak with you all today on the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas. As a person of African descent, I acknowledge that my ancestors did not arrive on Turtle Island by choice, yet I also recognize my responsibility as a settler to acknowledge the ongoing harms of colonization and to stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples through advocacy, respect, and action. We also acknowledge that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories to the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples. So let us commit to remembering the mistakes and traumas of the past, to speaking with authenticity, and to supporting truth and reconciliation in meaningful ways. Okay. Um, Before we begin our webinar series today, I would want to share a little bit more information about who we are. Just as a group, the Kajenga Family Wellness Project is a community-based initiative dedicated to strengthening Black families through culturally grounded, holistic, and healing-centered approaches. We are rooted in Afrocentric principles and community care. So the project provides education, wellness, programming, and support services that affirm identity, nurture family relationships, and promote mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Kajanga means to build in Swahili, and it reflects the project's commitment to building strong families and thriving communities. Through many workshops that we put on, family gatherings, parenting resources, youth mentorship, and community events, Kujanga creates spaces where family can connect, heal, and grow together. The project also addresses systemic barriers that impact Black families, emphasizing empowerment, resilience, and collective healing as pathways to wellness and liberation. Okay. So we are honored today to host Keisha Christie today as our guest facilitator. Um, we're so excited. We're going to explore how we raise confident communicators. So this is to help you as a parent and or your teen feel seen and heard. We want you all to learn simple and powerful storytelling tools to strengthen communication and resilience. So I will now pass this over to Christy. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll let her take over.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a sec. Wonderful. Okay. So, welcome, everyone. I am excited to be here this evening to be able to present the information this evening. One of the things that we are good at and bad at the same time is communication. And it's really because of what we bring to the table when we're communicating. See if, all right, we got that there. Wonderful. Okay. So it's what we bring to the table. And a lot of the times we carry baggage, we carry emotion, we carry our day. And it's challenging when we're trying to communicate with someone. And when I first had the opportunity to share the topic for this evening, I really wanted to bring home that parents and youth are seeing things a little bit differently, but tentatively having the same conversation. And when I say that, I mean that our young people are expressing themselves in ways that we didn't have that same opportunity to do. Growing up, at least in my time, we were seen and not heard. Feelings, what were feelings? You could have them, but you couldn't share them. Didn't you had to fix your face, you had to just kind of um, suck it up would be the term. But we're in a different time. And a lot of parents, I'm speaking from my own standpoint, so please don't quote me for all parents, but we're learning and we're trying to have new communication ways with our young people, communicate with them in the way that we wish we were communicated with. But even in that, it's still different. And what we're experiencing is a miscommunication. Everyone's trying to be heard, but there are certain tips and tools that we can use in order to allow us to be heard in a better way or differently. So this is who I am. My name is Keisha Christie. I am a storyteller, a TEDx speaker, and a workshop facilitator. I'm also the founder of Talking Tales, and I host a podcast called African and Caribbean Folktales Retold. And I also help people connect. I connect communities through story. I love building bridges, showcasing, highlighting, and developing creativity and communication. I want to empower everyone to find their voice and use their voice, heal through narratives, and reclaim their stories. There is a many proverbs that I have in my repertoire and I use because Proverbs when I was younger were these funny sayings that old people used to say, and they didn't make any sense. But what I've learned in transitioning to adulthood is that when you're in that adulthood, you find out the meanings. But why not skip the line and help our young people have a level playing field? Out in the world, we want to be seen and heard, but everything starts at home. I tell many Anansi stories where Anansi's out in the world looking for things, but he always has to remember the words of his mother to come home, start at home. So the idea of being seen and heard starts at home. And we have to create a space where our young people feel seen and heard, as well as parents, we need to feel that same feeling of being seen and heard by creating understanding. And that allows us to do different things. So throughout the night, we are going to go over three tools that I'm going to leave you with. Remember, even though we talk about the tools today, we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for participation because the way that we communicate, the way that we share with each other is not going to happen overnight. We need to build habits, and it takes 28 days to build a habit. So something you hear today might not come up tomorrow, but it might come the day after that and after that. But knowing what these tools are and how to use them is so important for us to really explore. So let's start now with our intro. So we've known that the way that we communicate is so critical. And what I love the most about storytelling in how I use storytelling as a storyteller, sharing stories, is that it creates connection. But it's not just connection in the fairy tale or in the folk tales of long ago. The beauty about folk tales is that whenever they're told, they seem to have some relevance in the current time. The connection that you build with someone when you hear a story, you find sameness. You find similarities with the character, or maybe there's a character that you're rooting for. That moment of connection, it takes the edge off. It changes how you show up or how you come to a situation or a circumstance. So let's start with this. Put a one in the chat if you are familiar with this African philosophy of Ubuntu. So stick a one in the chat if you're familiar with it. I'll give you a moment. All right. Ubuntu. I am because we are. When we think about this philosophy, it's so easy for us to connect it to community, connect it to global vision. But let's tighten the lens and apply it to our family, our home. I am because we are. There are many different moments where we're able to see this, but I'm going to share a fairly recent experience that highlighted this in so clearly for me. My eldest daughter graduated from college in June, and there was the preparation, the fashion, and getting ready. But here we are, grad day, traveling to the venue, being a part of the line, not knowing where you're going, following this line to this big auditorium with hundreds of chairs, struggling to find a seat to make sure you can sit where you can see the stage and the big screen. And it's not just a regular day. Everybody is dressed up and everybody's got their flowers and their extra this and that. And you have to make sure you're in the right spot. Well, by the time that we got there, all of the programs were finished. And of course, they had electronic programs, but they didn't work on your phone while you're inside the venue. That aside, it was time for the graduates to walk across the stage. They had, the president speak and share words. They had all different kinds of people to share words, but that's not what we were there for. We were there as parents to see our young people walk across the stage. And I couldn't remember my daughter's program. I kind of knew what it was, wasn't really sure. But anyways, the ancestors tell you where to go. So at one point I got up and said, I'm gonna move to another spot. I left my sister behind and I moved to the new spot. No idea where I'm going. Then I remembered that my daughter's first. Who decided to give her a last name that started with an A? I have notes. But there I was. I couldn't make a mistake because if I wasn't in the right spot, I would miss it. So I moved my way to the front of this area for where parents were to take pictures. And I had my phone up, waiting for her to walk across the stage. And there she was, in her black gown, walking across the stage. I don't remember the program. All I remember is they said her name and she was walking across that stage. And I stood with my phone capturing every single moment as she walked across. She shook the person's hand. She held up her certificate. I couldn't read the certificate from where I was, but I could see it. And in that moment, I remembered the moment when she looked me in my face and said, I quit school. I'm not going back. I held my breath because I was ready to go back to traditional parenting where I was going to kick her butt all the way back to school. But I said, let's play this out. And she found her way back to school on her own. She picked the program she most wanted to be a part of on her own. And there were nights where she wanted to give up, and I had to be there. There were days when I had to remind her of who she was because this was hard. School wasn't the way I remembered it. And there are times when you're just by yourself. There was a moment where she felt like she couldn't go on. It was hard. She was getting pushback and she knew her value, but it didn't seem to be enough. And I had to remind her of who she was in our home. I had to remind her how powerful she was. And I said, push back. And she did. And she got the marks she was looking for, and she was proud of herself. So, in that moment, when I saw her standing on that stage, all of those days and nights flipped through my mind. And every other moment and decision from the time she was born until then made sense. So when I look at Ubuntu, I am because we are. She was. She is. And then another proverb hit me again. I am here, but I represent 10,000. And of course, I wanted to ugly cry, but you're in a big public place. So I just held it in and I snapped my pictures and took my video. Some of it's shaky. I'm not sure we'll be able to recognize her from the video I took, but I was there. And then she got stuck as she came off the stage. So I went back to my seat. But then I realized that she's going to have to pass a certain area. And I needed to be there. So somehow I ended up right in front in another place I had no business being in. And when she finally got off the stage and walked all the way around, she looked directly in my eyes. And it was almost like her light was so much brighter. It's one thing to know that your parent is in the room, but to know that they saw you. I saw her. So it didn't matter who else saw her. It didn't matter if they said her name sort of incorrectly. I was there. She knew I was there. And we made four. I am because we are. And here is an example of how it shines through. And this might be not be your moment. It might not be grad. It might be first job. It might be first steps. It might be first novel. There's always going to be a first. And as long as there is the knowing of your value where you begin at home, when you go out into the world, you can do anything. So if you heard this proverb before, you can put a 3 in the chat if you heard this one before. This proverb hits me differently every time. If there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. I'm going to let it sit for a minute. If there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. Let's think about that. If everything starts at home, we must be able to prove that there is no enemy within. That means creating a space where there's a free flow of information, emotions, feelings, and conversation. And it's not always easy, but as long as it's available, there's the opportunity to take it up. There's an opportunity to ask a question. There's an opportunity to share all of the things. But you have to make sure that we've created this space. Now, creating a space where there is no enemy within starts with us as an individual. Because in between these two ears, the biggest critic lives. And the biggest critic shares things and digs up things that we've long forgotten about. And when we come to moments where we need to share something, the ugly, the things we never questioned, all the times you didn't stand up for yourself, all the times we didn't get the appreciation or approval, it comes back with a vengeance. And it tends to chat between our ears while we're supposed to be listening, while we're supposed to be present. And that could look like we're not being present, we're not being seen. But if we're creating this place, this space where we can be heard, we can be seen, we can share, not just the good things. Because, yes, of course, there's so many good things, hee haw moments, the challenges. It's what we build in the difficult times that stand firm during all seasons, during any storm. So let's carry this as we go into our session tonight. So here I am, storyteller, sharing about how we can raise confident communicators. And It begins with story. Let me tell you the power of story. When you share story, it builds trust, identity, and confidence. When we share stories, it's how we've passed down for generations our beliefs, our traditions, our values, and our voice. The voice that we heard growing up is the voice that stays with us. It becomes our critic. It becomes our cheering section. It becomes all of those things, but it's something that has been rolled over from generation to generation. Now, the voice your mother heard is her mother's voice, is her grandmother's voice. It keeps going and going. But we live in a time, a blessed time, where you are free to change your mind. You are free to do something different. And so if those voices are negative, we can change them into the positive. And it's not going to show up every time, but when it does, you can respond with that positive. Let's think about this. Who told you your very first story? Was it Cinderella? Was it an Anansi story? Was it Walk My Market on whatever day? What did you learn from that story? We listen to Anansi stories because these are the stories that build us up. They teach us resilience, wit, cleverness, how to move forward in the midst of diversity. Or, yeah, it it seems like we're having a laughing at in the moment. But when we think back on those stories, or if you've ever had a moment where a story has ever come to life for you, by that I mean you hear a story as a child about, I don't know, Anansi and Bullfrog, and how Anansi and was teaching Bullfrog how to jump. But Bullfrog didn't want to jump. Bullfrog said, My legs are for swimming. But Anansi wanted him to jump. So Anansi told him that alligator was coming, and yep, you guessed it. Bullfrog learned to jump. All right, so now you're in your life in the world, you're doing different things, and you have somebody that you're trying to teach them something. They don't want to learn how to cook. You're going to be hungry if you don't learn how to cook. Ah, I can DoorDash or whatever it is. Well, electricity goes out. You can't call for anybody. But now, all the times you were trying to figure out how to cook, that person is going to learn how to cook. They're going to learn how to light a fire. They're going to learn how to put on a pot, and they're going to learn to cook whatever it is that they need to eat. These things happen. Story come to life, right? So when we think about our stories, they carry lessons, laughter, legacy, and it's also where confident communication begins. Because when we tell stories, a story, the story could be the fairy tales of old, could be the folk tales that have lessons. It could be the lived experiences where the juiciness lies. Talking about old time school experiencing, talking about, first job experiences. We all know how certain things feel. We know that joy feels one way, sadness feels another, grief, struggle, but we see them differently. And because we have the same understanding, when we share a story, we find the sameness in it and it opens our heart. It helps us be open-minded because we can empathize. We can understand where certain individuals are coming from. So let's jump in to the tools. So the first tool is the listen, reflect, and share. So we're going to jump into this, and the first note is listen. Put a two in the chat if you know that there's two types of listening. I'll give you a moment. Put a two in the chat if you know that there are two types of listening. Wonderful. So here we talk about listening with your full attention. The first type of listening is passive listening. And passive is when someone is telling you something and you're scrolling on your phone or you're writing down a note or, you're not directly paying attention to that person, but you're hearing what they're saying, but you're not necessarily listening. The type of listening that's needed is active listening. And active listening is that I'm putting my phone face down for you moment. It's that I'm not doing anything else. I'm going to give you my eye contact moment, full attention, where you're listening with your head, your heart, and yourself. Just listening, not trying to solve anything, just listening. And we see this when in uh, relationships where one partner wants to tell something and the other partner just wants to fix. We're taking that away. We're taking that hat off and we're just listening with our whole self. We're just gathering the information and we're gathering it without judgment. It could be good, bad, or indifferent. We're just collecting information. And then there's the second part to this, and that is reflect. So you want to summarize or paraphrase what you've heard. Because sometimes, a few times, well, maybe I should ask you, have you ever had a time or a chance to be in conversation with someone and realize about halfway, maybe three-quarters of the way through the conversation, that you're having two completely different conversations? Huh. You could be talking, that you have um, something that you want to donate. And you're talking to the person that's collecting donations. And that person is telling you, hey, I am leaving right now. Bring me your donations. And you've got your donations and you're like, yes, I'm bringing them. But the person who's collecting the donations is only collecting non-perishable food items. But you have clothing. You're talking about the same thing, two different things. But no one ever asked for clarification, and no one ever tried to paraphrase or understand. So, what ends up happening when we don't clarify and we don't reflect is that we end up lose something is lost in translation. I think that's the phrase they use. So here's where you're taking in the information through active listening, and then you want to be sure you understood what you've heard. So what I hear you saying is, and even though this is the phrase that's in the presentation, that's not how it might turn out in your conversation. It might be, so what I say is, it could be, what are you telling me? It could be, it varies in on the way that you have the conversation or how you have the conversation. Sometimes I have conversation with my eldest daughter. We communicate through memes throughout the day. She'll send me some memes. I'll laugh, giggle, reply. And then when I come home or when we get together and she shares the experience of her day, I now have the full context for the memes that I received during the day, right? So it could be very, very different. The third part is to share your connection or your story. It's not every time that you're going to be sharing a story. You're not always going to have your input. Sometimes it's just listening and making sure you understood what you heard. Because sometimes talking it out and having someone really listen to you kind of helps you come up with your own ideas. And this could be on both sides. This could be parent to youth or youth to parent. We all kind of tend to see things differently when we speak them out loud. And so it's not always going to be, all right, now I'm going to share my thoughts, or all right, now I have to make sure I have a story to share to relate. It doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes it's just sitting with the information and giving space. We use the phrase holding space, but I think sometimes we do that loosely. Holding space is being present, holding space, sometimes is carrying the pause to help the ideas form. And every so often, it's sharing your connection. If somebody's talking about a loss, it might not be the same thing. The loss of a friend might not be the same thing as the loss of a family member, but it's still a loss. And there's some relatability in between. And it's the in between that helps to create connection and understanding. That's our first tool. So the second part of this is let's put this into practice. So for those of you who are want to drop it in the chat, feel free to do so. But let's think about it for a moment and let's think about these prompts. Think about, what does confidence mean to you? Or share a moment that you're most proud of. Or better yet, is there a proverb or a saying that really inspires you? You see, our stories are not just what we say. Our stories are in how we move, our music, our poetry. It's in everything. Every time we share our stories, we affirm that our voice matters and that we have a shared humanity. And so storytelling could look like, what's it called? Dance, some dance. There's a dance game on YouTube. I can't remember what it's called, but I used to do it all the time. Um, it could be, drive through. It could be a walk through the park. That act of grounding, that act of togetherness is the story because you're creating time to be together. You're creating time to have these conversations. And when I think back to, um, is there a proverb or a family saying? One of the things that stand out for me, thank you. Don't say you can't before you try. Yes, try and see what you can do. Of course, that's so powerful to hold. And when you share that now, and later on, when there's a difficult test, where there's a challenging experience, where there is like a moment of this is too hard, I just want to give up, the family saying comes to mind. And it's like, okay, I haven't tried it yet, so can't quit till I try. You see, these things, they stick and stay. Family first, some people carry. Um, and I'm trying to think of all the different proverbs, short and sweet, uh, that come about. When you think about what inspires you, when it thinks about the things that you hold on to, there are the moments. Dance like nobody's watching. Dance like nobody's watching might not actually be the dancing. It might be speak up and share your thoughts. Speak confidently. We have different ways of bringing it together. We have different ways of showing up. And when we say share your story, it's being true to yourself, sharing your truths. And that could be poetry. It could be just standing up for yourself. And not every conversation is going to be difficult. Some conversations are really easy, but then something changes halfway through the conversation. How do we get it back? Sharing our stories, sharing our beliefs, sharing the things that inspire us and the things that we're most proud of, we find that relatability in between. Your proudest moment might be writing a best-selling novel. Oh, okay. But it could also mean passing an exam. There's a sameness in between, that work to get to the goal, right? So there is that sameness, that relatability that helps us to hold on and hang on. It reminds us of what we need to try and what we should hold on to. When I think about the stories that we share, I often tell my kids about when I grew up. I'm born in Canada, but raised Jamaican. And when I was growing up, it was a struggle for identity because you were too Jamaican for the Canadians and too Jamaican for the Canadians. So that meant when I went to school and everybody flipped open their lunchbox, they pulled out a ham sandwich. Well, I pulled out a bully beef sandwich. Okay, clearly you're not Canadian. But then the Jamaicans who are fresh off the boat, as we would say back in those times, would say, boy, you're not Jamaican enough. So how do you get around that? I tell people that I was born in Canada, raised Jamaican. You see, outside of my house, as far as you could see, was Canada, right? As far as you could see, outside of my house, Canada, snow pants, uh, beaver tails, I think they call them. Um, Canada Day, all that stuff outside. As soon as I step foot into my mother's house, Jamaica. Okay? Cleaning, traditions, food. I think okay, we might have had more hot dogs than a traditional Jamaican family. I'm just saying, I'm just saying. You have your little things. But we all get accustomed to our surroundings and experiences. But you see, when you came and knocked on my door, if you weren't smelling jerk chicken, it was curry something, I knew I knew of all of it. But outside was Canada, inside was Jamaica. Weekend time, when everybody was going to go home and watch TV, I was going to family's house, my grandaunt's house. I was going to see my cousins, and their house was Wasara, Jamaica, right? Because that's where patois was slinging wall to wall. And if I didn't learn how to speak patois on my own, whoo, you had a crash course. Now, the young people of today, they can find their culture on their phone. They can travel to places easily. The internet. Oh my goodness. Okay, maybe I aged myself. Let me come back. But now the time is so different that you can embrace your culture differently. Yes, inside your house might still feel like Jamaica, Trinidad, Africa, wherever. But now you can embrace yourself even more, diving into your culture by doing the research, by following someone on Instagram or TikTok or whichever the most popular one is, and really seeing that you 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 can get the experience. You can learn the language if it's not being spoken at home. You can do all of these things faster and quicker. So there's that's still that need for finding who you are, but it's different because the way you do it is different. But you can find sameness in the middle, that relatability. Yes, yes. Authenticity rooted in s- that sameness. So when we think about sharing our story, we have to look at how things are similar but just different. So now we piece them together as a puzzle because we have the parent experience and we have the young person's experience, and we have to realize that they're still the same. It's the way that we get to them is different. And the way you create connection in the quickest way is by sharing the story of life. Share the story of lived experience. Share the story of folk tales. The funny thing, or what I love about telling folk tales, is that when you change characters from humans and you make it a fable, you make it an animal, you have two animals together, a hawk and a chicken. You have a hawk and a chicken, and they're having a fight. People can see, wait, they're both birds. Why don't they get along? It doesn't make sense. They're both birds. We can easily see the obvious when we look at things with a different lens. So we want to hold on to the things that we carry. And we want to be able to share our stories so that we're able to build on the sameness that we have. So that brings us to the second tool. And the second tool sounds sexy, but I can promise you it's more about building a muscle than remembering. Tool number two is breath and rhythm, finding the calm in your voice. It says finding calm voice, but it's finding the calm in your voice. Why does this matter? When we are emotional, happy, sad, angry, frustrated, our breathing changes. And when we have shortness of breath, we disconnect from our body. And if we disconnect from ourselves, we are definitely disconnecting from the conversation that we're holding. And when you regulate your breath, you come back, you're able to calm your body, calm your mind, and you're able to find a sense of healing and a sense of grounding. So, the best way to really jump into this is to jump right into it. So, before we speak, we breathe. Breath gives rhythm to our voice, and rhythm connects us to who we are, our being, our space, our ability. So, we want to be responsive. We want to be understanding. And the perfect way to illustrate where breath comes in is thinking of co-regulation. And co-regulation is a fairly new term for me, but I've seen it in action. But before we get into the example, let's give this breath work a try. We're going to do it 3 times, not because I think you're going to remember it, but because we're going to build muscle memory. And when we build muscle memory, it means that in the event of a difficult situation, your mind may not recall it right away, but your body will know what to do, if that's fair to say. We're going to give it a try. It's going to be funny at first because you have to get your mind right to pull everything together. So feel free to laugh at yourself. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for participation. So let's give this a try. I'm going to walk you through it. And this is box breathing. So box breathing is 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. And so we're going to give it a try this way. I'm going to give you the instruction, and then we'll try it a few more times to try and build that muscle memory. So let's begin. All right, we are going to inhale through the nose for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. It feels weird. That first one is okay, let's make sure we've got it right. But this time now, it should be a little bit easier because we've been through it once. So let's do it again. Inhale through your nose for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second time. All right. So now we've got it. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't need that much air, or oh my gosh, I didn't have enough air. So our body is learning something new. So it's going to feel a little more challenging. But this third one should be a little bit easier for you. And we'll talk about how it feels after. I told you, you got to laugh at yourself at first because you're teaching your body something that it does not do automatically. So let's give it a try. All right. Inhale through your nose. One, two, three, four, and hold. One, two, three, four. Exhale through the mouth. One, two, three, four, and hold. One, two, three, four. Whew, I'm tired. You tired? I'm tired. It seems challenging because it's something that our body doesn't do automatically. But here's how it shows up in life. This technique sounds wonderful, but here's how it shows up. I was watching a video on Instagram the other day, a young mother with her toddler, and he was freaking out. He was screaming in the worst way. And as he was screaming and wiggling around, his head hit his mom in the mouth. And I know the look. She gave the look. It's the look where you have to catch yourself because you've almost forgotten who this individual is. That look right there. But the rest didn't follow. The letting him go, the getting frustrated, just as frustrated as he was, that part didn't come. She took a moment for herself where she closed her eyes and she kept breathing. Can I tell you, was this box breathing? No. But I can tell you that she did some breathing, which was very visible. And when she felt grounded, she said in a very calm voice, "Are you ready to try again?" And he was still upset. So he said, "No." And he's still going. And she's still breathing. And almost like, I want to say magic, but you know, I'm taking a liberty here. He suddenly just stopped. Like he just slowed down. The crying went from hysterical to minimal to none in what felt like seconds. And then started taking the same breaths she was taking. And he says, "Try again." And she replied, "Okay, let's try again." And she puts him down. And of course, due to the world of editing, we didn't get the rest of the video. But I was so moved by that moment in that he was hysterical. Would he remember to do box breathing? Absolutely not. But she remained grounded. She took a moment and she came back to the situation. And I find that there are times I have a 23-year-old and an 8-year-old. And the way that I communicate with my 23-year-old is very different from how I communicate with my 8-year-old. Language, timings, different things. And the situations are very different, you can imagine. But it's interesting that my 8-year-old will say something to me that is very true. If you know, you know. But that reaction that flies up in me, it's a trigger because I could never say that to my parent. But instead of letting that out, I pause and I'm like, I need a minute. And then I come back to it. And I think there's more connection in the need to take that pause. A lot of the times we try to fill the pause, fill it with another conversation, fill it with a distraction, fill the pause. But the pause is needed to regulate yourself and to regulate your young person or young person regulate parent. It works both ways because of the connection. There's no way that a parent could not regulate their young person or vice versa because you have the same DNA runs through your body. So, and it's the same DNA that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And so when you regulate yourself, when you ground yourself, you're able to ground the person next to you or help them co-regulate. So when I think about this, I realize that if we can breathe together, we can speak together and we can understand each other. Because in the height of emotions, no one's listening. You disconnect from your body, you disconnect from the conversation. You're not able, you don't have the capacity to, on top of everything else, provide any semblance of understanding. But what you can do is take that moment, ground yourself so that you can revisit. You can come back, and it's okay. A lot of the times, as parents, we feel sometimes we have to have the answers because that's the way it always was. But I have to tell you, the I don't knows create a new way of communicating, creates a new understanding. It's an opportunity to learn together. It's an opportunity to um, unpack something new. It's like learning how to use some feature on your phone. We don't know, but we have an opportunity to ask for help. Don't do it for me, but let's figure it out together. And that let's figure it out together creates a space, an opportunity to feel seen and heard on both sides. And remember, creating it from home means that once you're a young person or parents, once you're out in the world, you see things differently. You move differently within that experience. We're doing things different. So the breath is something that is great. I'm going to tell you again, it's box breathing and it's the 4x4. So that's where we were inhaling for 4 through the nose, hold for 4, exhale through the mouth for 4, and hold for 4. It might not look like that. And it might not be the very first time you're out the gate. You're not going to do it perfect. I'm still learning how to do it correctly. I can tell you now I do variations of it. Much like our folk tales and our proverbs, there's a variation that works for you. Maybe your breathing is a count of 3 instead of 4, and maybe it's just a deep sigh. However you ground yourself, you can ground those around you and revisit those conversations. It gives you an opportunity to celebrate and to grow. So the third tool, before we get into the third tool, can you think of how you could have used this breathing pattern or this grounding technique before a tough talk or before a presentation? See, everything that we do at home, the skills we build, the techniques, the spirituality, the idea of being seen and heard, the idea of creating a safe space. When we do that and create that in a home space, home goes with you. Home is not a building. Home is that safety, that the net of family. It is those beliefs that are carried and passed down. So home can be wherever you are, meaning it goes with your young person. It goes with your parent who is going into a workplace that is very different from when they were younger, or your student going into school, into work, into new experiences for them, transitioning from one thing to another, transitioning schools, classes, sports teams, uh, and so on and so on. So everyone's having their own experiences, but those beliefs, that idea of home creates value, creates consciousness, creates a safety that they can carry with them. Everyone's carrying with them. So that is where that is. But when you have a difficult talk, the first thing that we do, hold breath or shortness of breath, and immediately we detach. But now we have a technique in our toolbox that we can go back to. And it might not be a count of four, right, as you come out the door, but it might be a deep breath. It's that act of grounding that will show up for you. So let's look at our third tool. Our third tool is reframing. And so reframing is important because, again, we're going back to the things that stay between our ears. And the stories that we tell ourselves shape how we think, how we speak, and how we show up. So if we tell ourselves a story of doubt, we shrink. If we tell ourselves a story of confidence, we rise. We feel empowered. We carry that confidence in every space that we go into and we bring it back with us. So here's the thing. You want to notice the stories that you tell yourself. So whether you're a parent or a young person, there are stories that we tell ourselves. Um, the idea of being a perfect parent or the idea of knowing it all or not being good enough, whatever challenges from childhood, they sneak up on you between the ears. And it does affect how you show up. But let's notice the stories that we repeat to ourselves. It's not something that we come across every day. It's that moment of conflict where it will pop up for you. And in those moments, it changes how you show up. It becomes something else that you've put on, and it can create um, challenges in communication. But we also want to see how we can reframe these stories because if you change the story, you change the outcome. So when we look at the story that's being played over and over or pops up unexpectedly, we have to ask ourselves, is this helping me? There are some stories that do, triumph of the Olympics, triumph of purchase of first car, first house, um, relationship, biggest accomplishments. Those are helpful. But there are some that hang around somewhere in the back that we don't think about because the incident, the feeling happened so long ago that we've thought we've long left it behind, tend to sneak up. And we have to be able to identify, is it helpful? And if it's not, we definitely need to replace it with something that's empowering. It could be a current memory, something to, uh, I'm going to date myself again. Remember the floppy disk? And remember that sometimes you got those discs that you wanted to record over and you had to put the piece of tape and record over them. Or the cassette tape, where you might have gotten a cassette tape from, um, I'm gonna say, uh, NSYNC. You're not an NSYNC fan. You probably never were one, but the cassette was there. Now you want to tape over it and you want to put your R&B slows on it. You put the piece of tape over those two ends, you stick it back in there in the recorder and you record over it. Even the memory sticks, you could reformat them and write over. So this is what we're doing now. We're going to be you take those things that pop up and we rewrite them. And um for our youth, for our young folks, what I want to say is the stories, the inner stories, the stuff that plays in between your ears don't have to be things that happened from long ago. There are things that we currently carry. Sorry, that was my break the cycle alarm. Every night at 8:01, break the cycle comes up on my phone, just as a way of out loud reprogramming. Perfect timing, right? It's the way of reframing the story, reprogramming the mindset. And for me, it doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be difficult. It could be something that you want to be different, something that you want to change, something that evolves as we evolve, right? So, example, when you think you can't do something, you want to change it to, I'm learning to do this. And that reminds me of the quote, he who thinks he can and he who thinks he can't, they're both right. So you have to understand that two things can be true at the same time, but it doesn't have to be the end. I can't do this can easily be changed to, I'm learning to do this. No one listens to me can be changed to, my voice matters. And when you change your story, your body responds. When you begin with for example, no one listens to me. When you say it, you find that your body changes, your shoulders droop, your chest kind of closes up. But when you change it to my voice matters, you sit up, your chest opens, and the sound seems to sound more, it's got a vibe to it, it's got a spark, it's got a change. So the way that we speak to ourselves and the way that we speak to others, it's the same thing. When you speak to yourself in a way that creates that empowerment, you're able to extend that empowerment to in your conversations. You want to think of the affirmation that we have below. I'll give you a moment to read it and then we can say it together. I speak life into my story. My voice carries power. Now, feel free to write it down and stick it up over your computer, save it on your phone. You might even create an alarm for yourself that says, I speak life into my story. It seems silly, but the amount of silly things that I've seen in my own experience, I've written things down like, I want to be a TEDx speaker. Becoming a TEDx speaker started on a post-it note. And this is from a person who was very introverted, nervous to have conversations, a recovering awkward person. And I had a nerve to write on a red, orange, on an orange sticky note that I wanted to become a TEDx speaker. And I put the year and I stuck it right above my computer. The year came, I wasn't a TEDx, but I left the post-it note up. The following year, I got the application, I went through the process, and now I'm a TEDx speaker. The silly things, or the things that we think are silly, give us a power in a way that we're not expecting. It transforms how we show up and it transforms how we share in our conversations. And so we want to know that I speak life into my story. My voice carries power. And we can do this on a daily basis. So you can do it intermittently. We can make things happen. So type in the chat, my new story begins with. What does your new story begin with? You can do a one-word affirmation, love, courage, hope. What does your new story begin with? I'll give you a moment. Oh, I love that. Openness, hope, movement. Ooh, divine confirmation. Ooh, that's powerful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And so whatever they look like, whatever it looks like, it will be. because you're able to change your story. You're able to give it new life. And you do it with your words, with a post-it note, with an alarm in your phone, whatever that looks like, that's what it will become. So this is a story that I wanted to share because of its meaning. And it really brings together the idea of if there is no enemy within, the enemy outside cannot harm us. It brings together the idea of Ubuntu, I am because we are. And it just helps us to stand on the things that we've learned this tonight. Now, unfortunately, there's no more box breathing. But if you'd like to run through that again, drop it in the chat. Drop a four in the chat and we'll do box breathing again before our time ends. But this is one of those folk tales that is timeless. So this is the story of seven spools of thread. There were seven brothers, and these brothers lived on a vast farm. And their father worked tirelessly to make sure that he brought in a good crop so that he could take care of his boys. Their mother had passed away a few years earlier, and so the father was alone trying to make sure everything came together, give them food, give them strength, send them to school, all those things. But the boys had a problem. They were together all the time, and they would fight. They would argue about everything. Oh, when they went to work, they would argue about the time to start. They would even argue about the time to finish. And they would argue and argue and argue that the sun would completely set before they left the farm to go home. And then when they sat down to have their dinner, whatever their father prepared, they would argue about who had what and how much. It was nonstop nice. Oh, they bickered, bickered, bickered. And they would spend so much time arguing and fighting with each other that none of them noticed that their father was moving a little slower than normal. He was more tired than usual. And even his attempts to quell their quarrels, mm, it happened less and less. Their father was sick. He wasn't just sick, he was very sick. And one day, he lay down to sleep. When the boys found him, they didn't know what to do. They knew they had to call someone, but they began fighting over what they were supposed to do next. Finally, neighbors heard them bickering back and forth and called the chief of the village. The chief came to their home, looked at them, and said, "Your father gave me something for you, but you must come to my hut and we'll discuss it. I will wait for you there." The chief went back to his hut to wait. And what do you think happened? That's it. The brothers began to fight over go, when they should go, what they should wear, how they should look. They argued and argued and argued. Well, it took some time, but finally they figured it out and they made their way to the chief's hut. The chief asked them to come and sit down, and he began to tell them how much their father loved them and that their father had something so precious for them. But they fought so much. Their father was afraid that they would lose it. So instead, he was going to give them this. And he pulled out spools of thread. He gave the oldest one white, the second oldest orange, the next one blue, red, black, this and that, till he got all seven of the brothers had a different color spool of thread. And the chief looked at him and said, "You have a challenge. By the end of tomorrow, you must turn these seven spools of thread into money." Well, the brothers looked at their thread, and yep, they were about to start fighting, but the chief said, One thing, no more fighting. If you fight, you lose it all. I will see you tomorrow. The chief shooed them away. They went back to their hut and they knew that they had to do right by their father. So they couldn't fight. What were they going to do with this thread? Well, they thought about it and they thought, oh, we will make material, beautiful fabric. Where they lived, everyone wore such beautiful fabric. There was just one problem. There was not enough thread to make a piece of each color. And where they lived, everyone wore one color. If it was red, it was red. Yellow, it was yellow. But they didn't have enough thread. What were they going to do? So they started to share ideas. Maybe they'd wrap it around a basket. Maybe who would want that? Everybody has their own basket. No, they need to go back to that fabric idea. But the youngest one had an idea. What if? What if we put all of the threads together and create a brand new, beautiful kind of fabric? Brothers thought for a moment and thought to themselves, no, that's not going to work. That can't work because everybody only wears one color. But what if we gave them something new, something different? They thought about it for a moment. They thought about it for a moment. What if he gave them something new? So the brothers set up the weaving machine and they started to weave the threads together and they up and down and in and out. And by the time they were done, there was a beautiful piece of fabric. Mm, just beautiful. And they thought, wow, you know what? There's enough thread left that we can make two pieces of fabric. So they went back in and made another piece, big, lovely pieces of fabric, draped it over their shoulders and said, let us go to market. They went to market and out they called. Beautiful fabric. The middle one called. The most beautiful fabric. The eldest called. The most beautiful fabric. They called and called and called. Well, the people, curious, what kind of fabric could this be? And they looked and they touched, feel. No one was really buying. But there was a visitor in the village that day, and he just happened to be a very special visitor. But when he wanted to see the fabric too, so he pushed through the people and he saw a fabric more beautiful than he had ever seen in his life. This fabric was so beautiful, it was fit for a king. A king? Huh. How much? How much is this fabric? Well, the brothers whispered amongst themselves. Well, this fabric, it's fit for a king. Yes, and I am the king's treasurer, said the man. Oh, the brothers talked amongst themselves. Well, it would have to be worth at least a bag of gold. That's it. The man took the pieces of fabric, gave them their bag of gold, and the brothers had done it. Within one day, they had turned 7 spools of thread into money. They rushed all the way back to the chief's house. They rushed to the chief's house, and the chief sat them down. And they said, Chief, look what we've done. We were able to turn the 7 spools of thread into money. Here's our bag. The chief looked and said, good job. It's a good job indeed. But what did you learn? Uh, well, when we worked together, things happened. We didn't fight. We didn't fight at all. And we were able to do this together. The chief was proud. He said, your father will be very proud of you. But if you see out there, your father left all of this farmland for you. Well, what would have happened if we weren't able to do it? Well, all of that farmland would be sold and it would go to the poor people in the village who don't have money for themselves. Oh, well, the youngest was very happy that they had done what they said they would do, but something needed to be done because the poor people in the village still needed something. The youngest looked around at his older brothers, called them into a circle to listen to his idea, and he whispered for a while, and the brothers knew what to do. The very next day, they pulled out their weaving machine and called the villagers to come, bring your thread. And they taught the villagers how to make beautiful pieces of fabric. Every villager learned how to make the fabric, not with one color, but with many, many colors. And the whole village began to sell these pieces of fabric in the village, outside of the village, and wider and wider and wider. So not only did the boys keep their fortune that their father left them, the whole village began to build. They began to get their own fortune because they learned how to work together. Hmm? They say that if you have one stick, it's easy to break. But when you pile them all together and try to break it, you can't break it. So remember, if there's no evil within, there is no evil outside that can hurt you. And if we stick together, nothing, nothing at all can break you. Ooh, all right. So that brought us to where we are now. Let's take a moment and go over. Thank you so much. Oh, I just see that my picture didn't come through. All right. So let's look at our voices build bridges, and that means conversation. Sometimes we move from communication to lack of communication. We silent treatments, or, oh, um, I'm gonna wait till I feel better. And there are many times where I've had to ignore my feelings because I needed to create space or hold space for others to speak. And I couldn't do that with how I was feeling. So, what I'd like to do before our time uh, ends this evening is ask you to type one word that describes how you're leaving today. What did you learn? What did you pick up? What might you use? And while you're dropping that in the chat, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my downloadable 7-day family story practice plan. Like I said, everything shows up differently. You're not always going to be able to go through a checklist of the things that you're going to share or not share. But this is a 7-day sheet that helps you to talk about your highs, talk about your lows, open communication where it might not be open now, or expand on communication that's already freely being shared. The What we want to remember is stories matter, our voice matter, and it carries. The voices we hear stay with us. The voices we share give us power. Our voices connect generations. And in order to create that connection, the importance is on the sharing part. And we have to be confident. We are confident communicators. Confident communicators because space has been laid, space has been prepared for us to be seen and heard on both sides and both levels. And so, what I'd like to do is I'll leave a link to the downloadable worksheet that you can take on and give it a try. Give it, 2, 3 minutes a day and see how it changes how you communicate, and see if there are any times where, you'll fall back on some of the things that were picked up today. When does box breathing fall in for you? What does grounding look like for you? And it might be help you with those more challenging conversations. So, yes, our stories connect us, our voices matter, and together we grow stronger. That story helped us to see that together we are stronger. And Ubuntu is a global experience. It's a community experience, but it's also a family experience and a philosophy that we can carry forward on and on. So let's see. I'm gonna double check in the chat and see if there are any questions, statements. Wonderful. More wisdom and strength. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? We have a few minutes left. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask or anything you'd like to add? I'll give you a moment to see if anyone is writing in the chat there. Wonderful. So before we go, I'll take the last few minutes since there are no questions and just round it out with oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Holding space by carrying a pause. Yes, carrying the pause is definitely powerful. And it's one thing that we've been afraid of. Uh, we always feel like we need to fill that space, but that pause can be very powerful. Mhm, mhm. All right. Wonderful. So keep dropping your comments in the chat, and thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So we do have a few minutes left, but I think I'll turn things back over to you.
Great. No, wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you so much for this workshop, Keisha. It's been really insightful. And we're so happy to have had you here today. Okay. Hold on, give me a second. I'm not sure why it's grayed out. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. I just wanted to do a few announcements to kind of wrap up. Some of the upcoming initiatives that we do have include a women's support group, and this would be led by our newest therapists, Yana and Cheryl. We also host bi-weekly parenting webinars like the one that you're attending today. And these would cover a range of topics such as family attachment, play and storytelling in parenting, financial literacy, and much more. In November, we're also holding an elder circle to celebrate and showcase our upcoming documentary. Um, it is a powerful reflection of wisdom, legacy, and community. And we're also excited to present our men's panel in December. This is just before the holiday season. It would be a space for dialogue, reflection, and empowerment. In addition, Nifarata offers a wide range of programs for children, youth, and adults, including therapeutic groups, individual and family counseling, and community outreach initiatives. Finally, we would love if you guys would save the date. Our annual Kujenga Family Wellness Fair will take place on May 9th, 2026. It's a free, family-friendly celebration with workshops, cultural performances, and community vendors. Tickets are available on Eventbrite, and we'll share the link with you all soon as more details are finalized. All right. So, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you all for engaging so thoughtfully. And a big thank you as well to Keisha Christie for sharing such powerful insights and practical tools on how storytelling can strengthen communication, connection, and confidence within our families and communities. Um, our goal is to continue to create spaces that uplift families, nurture resilience, and celebrate the cultural wisdom that connects us all. So we hope that what you've learned tonight inspires you to keep practicing these storytelling techniques at home and in your communities. Thank you again for being with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Have a wonderful evening.